You don't belong in this neighborhood, boy. People like you don't just move into Stonebridge.
Officer Wade Pruitt barked a harsh laugh, his face twisted with pure condescension, as he drove the heavy heel of his boot straight into a cardboard box on the porch. The sound of shattered wedding glasses echoed into the quiet street. The tall black man standing in the doorway didn't flinch. He kept his hands open, empty, and perfectly visible. The way a black man learns to hold his hands before he even learns to drive. Pruitt tapped 2 fingers aggressively against the gold badge on his uniform.
Look at his badge. I am the law here. You're done.
Now get on your knees before I put you where you belong. Or did the dirty rags you're wearing clog your ears? The black man looked calmly into the officer's eyes, his voice low and immovable. Officer, I would advise you, very seriously, to reconsider your next move. Pruitt smirked, gesturing to the crowd of neighbors beginning to watch on their manicured lawns. Reconsider. A broke burglar like you, trying to lecture a cop. But this arrogant officer had no idea. None, whose hands he had just forced into metal cuffs. This man wasn't a criminal. He was the head of the Civil Rights Division at the United States Department of Justice. The top federal official who literally polices the police. And Wade Pruitt had just made the biggest mistake of his life. So hold on to that. You already know what this man is. You know the punchline. Wade Pruitt doesn't. And he won't for another 2 hours. And that is exactly what makes this story so satisfying. Because, for the next 2 hours, you get to watch an arrogant man dig his own grave. One shovelful at a time. While the answer sits 6 inches from his hand the entire time, man picked the wrong porch, the wrong house, the wrong man, on the wrong night, in front of the wrong witness. Let's get into it. Let me take you back. Not far. 3 hours before that boot came down on those wedding glasses. Hartwell, Maryland. Population about 57,000. Roughly 40 minutes outside Washington, depending on the Beltway. And the Beltway is never kind. The kind of town the relocation brochures call charming. Tree-lined streets. A walkable little downtown. A coffee roaster. A wine shop. A bakery that sells $9 loaves of sourdough and somehow stays in business. Little League on Saturdays. Flags on the porches. A welcome sign at the town line with the slogan painted underneath in friendly cursive. Hartwell. Where neighbors still know your name. Nice town. Quiet town. Safe town. That last one. Though, that one depends entirely on who you ask. Because safe is not a fact. Safe is a feeling. And a feeling can be handed out to some people and quietly withheld from others. And the town can keep right on smiling the whole time, underneath the cursive and the sourdough. The Hartwell Police Department had a problem, and it was not a small one. 9 civilian complaints in 3 years for excessive force or unlawful detention. 2 of them settled out of court. Quietly. The numbers sealed. The paperwork buried so deep, you'd need a federal subpoena to find it. And the number of Hartwell officers disciplined for any of it, 0. Not one. Not a suspension. Not a demotion. Not a letter in a file. Every complaint reviewed internally. Every complaint, after careful internal review, found to be unsubstantiated. Case closed. Move on. Have a nice day. We'll see you at the farmer's market. Remember that. The internal review that always reviewed itself and always came back clean. We're going to come back to it. And when we do, it's going to matter more than you can imagine right now. The man in the uniform is Officer Wade Pruitt. White, 38 years old. 12 years on the Hartwell force. Built thick through the shoulders. The kind of build that says he never skipped a workout in his life. The same way his record says he never sat through a single de-escalation training without checking his phone. His colleagues had a word for him, and they meant it as a compliment. Proactive, that's the word. Hold on to it. You're going to hear it again. And the second time you hear it, it's not going to sound like a compliment at all. It's going to sound like a verdict. Proactive. It's what his sergeant wrote on his last 3 evaluations. Officer Pruitt is highly proactive. It's what the union rep called him. Proactive cop. Gets out of the car. Doesn't wait for trouble to find him. He goes and finds it. And he did go find it. He found it on a lot of Tuesday afternoons and a lot of Sunday evenings. Mostly behind the wheels of cars that didn't look like they belonged on the streets. Wade Pruitt had decided he was personally responsible for protecting. Pruitt had 2 prior complaints sitting in his file, both filed by black residents of Hartwell, both dismissed after internal review. One was a delivery driver who said Pruitt followed him through the Stonebridge subdivision for 1.5 miles, then pulled him over and asked him 3 times whether the packages in the back were actually his to deliver. The driver had a route sheet. Pruitt never asked to see it. The complaint went nowhere. The other was a 17-year-old kid walking home from basketball practice who got stopped, patted down on the sidewalk in front of his own block, and asked what he was doing in this part of town. The kid lived in that part of town, had lived there his whole life. That complaint went nowhere either. The system reviewed itself. The system found nothing wrong with itself. The system is very good at that. And there was one more thing about Wade Pruitt that half the department knew and nobody ever put in writing. His body camera had a real talent for being late. Not broken. Late. It would come on a few beats after a stop started. Missing the part where the words got said. The part where the tone got set. The part that decided whether the next 10 minutes went easy or went the other way. Funny how that works. Cameras fine all shift. Fine for the easy stops. Fine for the lost tourists and the fender benders. Then things get tense and suddenly it's catching the back half of a story it never saw the front of. That detail, the camera that's always a little late, hold on to that one too. Because tonight, Wade Pruitt was going to make a mistake about cameras that he would spend the rest of his life regretting. Now the other man, you already know what he is. You heard me say it. The head of the Civil Rights Division at the United States Department of Justice. So let me tell you what that actually means. Because those words can wash right over you if you don't sit with them. That is not a desk job. That man runs the single office in the entire federal government. Whose specific, written, statutory job is to investigate and prosecute police misconduct. When you hear about the Justice Department opening an investigation into a police department, after something goes horribly wrong, the kind of investigation that ends with a federal monitor and a court order controlling how a department operates for the next 10 years, that investigation comes out of his division. When a federal prosecutor charges a cop with violating your constitutional rights while wearing the badge, that case runs through his office. His entire job, his whole career, was officers exactly like Wade Pruitt. And here is the thing you have to understand about that lawn. None of it mattered to Wade Pruitt. Pruitt didn't see a title. He didn't see a resume. He didn't see 26 years of work, or a vote in the United States Senate, or a name that men in Washington said carefully. All Wade Pruitt saw was a tall black man in a faded t-shirt and work jeans, carrying boxes into a $500,000 house in the whitest, wealthiest corner of Hartwell. And Pruitt's gut told him exactly one thing. That's not his house. His name was Elias Thornton, 52 years old, tall, broad through the chest, gray coming in at the temples like frost on a window. That evening he was dressed down on purpose. Old t-shirt, Jeans worn soft at the knee. Sneakers. He didn't mind getting dusty. Because you don't wear a suit to carry furniture. He'd worn the suit earlier in the day. 3 states worth of meetings ago. And he'd left it on a hanger in the car. In the inside pocket of that suit jacket, folded in soft black leather, was a small identification holder. He carried every working day of his life. He kept it the way some men keep their keys or their phone. Close. Automatics. Without thinking, he had carried it through metal detectors in buildings. Most Americans will never be allowed to enter, and in about 90 minutes, that leather holder and one other piece of paper were going to become the 2 most important objects in this entire story. They were going to be lying on the grass of Elias Thornton's own front lawn, in plain view, 6 inches from the boot of the officer detaining him. And that officer was going to step right over them like they were trash. But we're not there yet. Right now, it's 10 minutes past 5 in the afternoon. The moving truck is parked at the curb of 14 Stonebridge Court. The light is going gold across the lawns, and Elias Thornton is standing in the open doorway of a house that, 3 days ago, became his, holding a box marked kitchen, fragile in both hands, while his son carries a lamp up the walk behind him. His son, 16 years old, Caleb, tall like his father, lanky in the way boys are right before their bodies catch up to their feet. Caleb had his phone out half the day, filming the empty rooms, narrating like a real estate agent for his grandmother back home. And this, Grandma, is what we call a walk-in closet. Very fancy. Very rich people, because the house felt too big and too quiet. And joking was how the boy filled it. That phone, the one Caleb was holding to make his grandmother laugh, in 90 minutes. That phone was going to be the only thing standing between his father and a story that ends very, very differently. The kind of story that doesn't get a headline. The kind that just gets a man who drives home, if he gets to drive home, and tells nobody, but we are not there yet. Right now, across the street, behind a bay window, with the curtains pulled just enough, a neighbor named Diane Foster is watching 2 black men carry boxes into the Hendersons' old house. And Diane Foster is reaching for her phone too. So what set this in motion? A clean house, a moving truck, a father and a son, a gold afternoon. What turned an ordinary Sunday move-in into the worst night of Wade Pruitt's career? The answer to that question is the entire point of this story. Let's keep going. Here's something you need to understand about the Stonebridge subdivision. 41 houses, cul-de-sacs, and curated lawns, and a homeowners association that sends strongly worded emails about garbage can placement. In the last census, Stonebridge was 91% white. Not because there's a sign. There's no sign. There hasn't needed to be a sign in this country for a very long time. The sign got replaced by something quieter and more durable a long time ago. Diane Foster had lived in Stonebridge for 19 years. By every account, a perfectly pleasant woman, brought casseroles to the sick, watered the neighbors' plants when they traveled. And when she looked out her bay window that afternoon and saw 2 men she didn't recognize, 2 black men she didn't recognize, moving boxes into the house across the street, the house that had sat empty since the Hendersons moved to Florida. Something in Diane Foster did not think new neighbors. Something in Diane Foster thought break-in. She watched for 4 minutes. She watched a teenager carry a lamp. She watched a grown man balance a box marked fragile. She watched them prop the front door open with a brick. The way every human being who has ever moved into a house has propped a door open with a brick. And then she picked up the phone and she dialed 3 numbers. I'm not going to read you the emergency call word for word, but the shape of it is this. A calm woman's voice. A little breathless. Says she'd like to report a possible burglary in progress. 2 males. The old Henderson place. The one that's supposed to be empty. She doesn't know them. They don't look like they belong in the neighborhood. She'd feel a lot better if someone came by. The dispatcher asks if she sees any weapons. No. Any forced entry she doesn't know. The door's just open. Can she describe the individuals? And here, Diane Foster says, the 4 words that put everything else in motion. The 4 words that federal investigators would later play out loud in a quiet conference room while nobody met anybody's eyes. They're black. That was the description. That was the probable cause. That was the whole case. The call dropped to a unit at 16 minutes past 5. And the unit that took it, of course it was Officer Wade Pruitt. 2 minutes out. Already in the area. Already proactive. Already certain, before he ever turned onto Stonebridge Court, that he knew exactly what he was about to find. He keyed his radio. Responding. Possible burglary in progress. And he stepped on the gas. He did not run the address. If he had run the address, the county property record would have told him that 14 Stonebridge Court had changed hands 72 hours earlier. New deed. New owner. Recorded. Stamped. Public. It was right there. Anyone could have pulled it up in 15 seconds. Wade Pruitt did not spend the 15 seconds. Wade Pruitt had already decided. And a decision that's already made doesn't go looking for facts that might unmake it. 19 minutes past 5. The cruiser came up Stonebridge Court, without lights and without a siren. Slow. Deliberate. Hunting. It rolled past the moving truck and stopped at an angle across the end of the driveway, blocking it. The way you box in a vehicle you've already decided is going to try to run. Elias Thornton was coming down the front walk for another load when he saw it. And here's the thing. He didn't tense. He didn't bolt. 26 years of work had taught his body a particular kind of stillness. And this country had taught it another. And the two of them met in his shoulders and held him very calm. He set the empty box down on the grass. He stood up straight. He put his hands loosely at his sides, where they could be seen. And he waited. Pruitt got out slow, one hand on his belt. Near the holster. Not on it. Near it. Close enough to be a sentence all by itself. Evening. Pruitt's eyes went up the house and back down to the men. What are you doing here? Good evening. Officer. Thornton's voice was even courteous. I'm moving into my home. This is my house. Pruitt's mouth did something that wasn't quite a smile. Your house. Yes. Sir? We closed on Thursday. My son and I are unloading the Brust. I got a call about a break-in at this address. Pruitt took a step closer. Onto the grass now. 2 males. Matches you pretty good. So let's try it again. Whose house is this? It's mine. Officer. Still even. Still patient. The closing documents are right here. And Thornton started to turn, slowly, toward the porch, where a folder sat on top of a box. May I show you the deed? It has my name on it. It has the date. It has the county stamp. Don't move. Pruitt's hand came off his belt. Did I say you could move? Thornton stopped. Both hands came back up. Open. Visible. I'm reaching for the paperwork you asked about. That's all. I didn't ask for paperwork. Anybody can print a piece of paper. Pruitt's voice climbed a notch. Found its edge. I asked you a question, and I want identification. Where's your ID? In the car. In my jacket. I can walk you over and... In the car. Pruitt let it hang there. Satisfied. Like the man had just confessed to something. So you got no ID on you. You're inside a house that's supposed to be empty. And you want me to believe you bought a $500,000 place in this neighborhood? That's the story. And right there is where you can see it. The man told the truth 4 times. It's my house. The deed's right here. My ID's in the car. My son and I. 4 true things. And every single one of them got turned into evidence against him. Because when a man's already decided what he's looking at, the truth doesn't sound like the truth anymore. It sounds like a story. It sounds like a black man getting clever. That's when Pruitt looked down at the box on the porch. The one marked fragile, and without breaking eye contact, without one flicker of hesitation. He lifted his boot, and he brought the heel of it straight down through the cardboard. The crunch of glass, wedding glasses, 25 years of marriage, gone in one sound, scattered in the bottom of a crushed box on a porch. Oops, Pruitt said. Thornton didn't move. His jaw tightened, just slightly. The only crack in him all evening. But his hand stayed open, and his voice stayed level. That was not necessary. Officer, you don't tell me what's necessary. Pruitt stepped right up into his space. Get on your knees. I will not be getting on my knees. I have committed no crime. I've answered every question you've asked me. And the deed to this house is 15 feet away with my name printed on it. I'm asking you, one more time, calmly. I like to look at it before this goes any further. On your knees. Or I'll put you there. Up the walk. The screen door bumped open. Caleb, 16 years old. Lamp, still in one hand from his last trip. And now he was standing on the porch, looking at a police officer with his hand near his gun, telling his father to get on his knees on the lawn of the house they'd moved into 3 days ago. Dad. His voice cracked on the one word. It's okay. Son. Thornton didn't take his eyes off Pruitt. Stay right there. Keep your hands where the officer can see them. We're fine. We're fine. He said we're fine to a 16-year-old. And he didn't believe it. And the boy didn't believe it. And that's the thing nobody outside this country fully understands. The lie. A black father tells his son on a lawn with a gun nearby. We're fine. He says it to keep the boy calm. He says it to keep the boy alive. And it costs him something to say it that you and I will never see. On any body camera. Who's this? Pruitt's chin jerked at Caleb. My son. Caleb. He's 16. Tell him to get down here where I can see him. He's right there. Officer. He's not going anywhere. Neither am I. And then, gently, Thornton did the thing that ended up saving his life and his son's, the thing he did out of pure professional instinct without even deciding to do it. He looked at his boy and he said, Caleb, you can record this. Go ahead and record. And Caleb, God bless this kid, 16 years old and shaking, lifted his phone. The red dot came on, 21 minutes past 5. The phone started recording, and from that second forward, every word, every gesture, every ugly thing that came out of Wade Pruitt's mouth was being written down somewhere. Wade Pruitt could not reach and could not erase. There was something else recording too. And Pruitt didn't know about that one either. Mounted above the front door of 14 Stonebridge Court, angled down at the porch and the walk and the lawn, was a smart doorbell camera. The Hendersons had left it. It came with the house. It had been recording. Motion activated. This whole time, a little glass eye bolted to the very house. Wade Pruitt was accusing this man of burglarizing. Sit with that. The house itself was a witness. The house Pruitt said wasn't his was, at that very moment, gathering the evidence that would prove it was. Put the phone down. Pruitt called up to Caleb. He's allowed to record. Officer, Thornton's voice stayed level. He's on his own property, and he's not interfering. You know that's his right. It was, and Pruitt knew it was. But in that moment, on that lawn, with that badge and that holster, Wade Pruitt got to decide what the law meant. That's the part that should keep you up at night. Not that there are bad cops, that on a quiet street with no one watching, or no one a court would believe, a single man gets to decide, in real time, what your rights are, and then write it up however he wants. Turn around, Pruitt said to the man, hands behind your back. Officer, I have committed no crime. I've answered every question. The deed to this house is 15 feet away with my name on it. I'm asking you, one more time, to look at it before this goes any further. Turn around, now. Thornton looked at him for a long second, and then, slowly, deliberately, the way he did everything, he turned around and put his hands behind his back. A 52-year-old man, on the lawn of the house he just bought, on the day he was supposed to be unpacking his kitchen, hands behind his back, while his 16-year-old son filmed it through tears. That's when the second cruiser turned onto Stonebridge Court. Backup arrived at 24 minutes past 5. 2 officers got out. Sergeant Roy Hutchins, 15 years on the Hartwell force. Pruitt's shift supervisor. A man who had built an entire career on one core principle: never be the one who makes the wave. And beside him, fresh out of the cruiser, a rookie, Officer Daniela Reyes, 14 months on the job, young, watchful, and about to be handed the worst kind of test there is, the kind where the right answer costs you everything and the wrong answer costs you nothing at all. Pruitt filled them in fast and loud, the way you do when you're building the version of events you want everyone to remember. Burglary in progress. Subjects inside a vacant house. No identification. Got a juvenile with him. Subjects being non-compliant. Non-compliant. The man had his hands behind his back. He hadn't raised his voice once, but the word was already in the air now. And words like that, once they're in the air, they're hard to pull back down. Reyes looked at the man, looked at the moving truck, looked at the lamp sitting on the porch and the box marked fragile, and the brick holding the door open, and the teenager crying behind a phone. And something in her did the math that Pruitt refused to do. She leaned toward Hutchins, quiet, barely above a breath. Sarge, that's a moving truck. There's a kid. Maybe we just run the address before we... Pruitt's got it. Hutchins didn't even look at her. 3 words. Pruitt's got it. And with those 3 words, the last safety net on Stonebridge Court folded up and disappeared. Reyes had reached for the brake. Hutchins slapped her hand off it. Pruitt's got it. That's how it works. It's almost never one monster. It's one man with the bad gut, and one man above him too comfortable to question it, and one rookie who knew better and got told to stand down. The bad cop is the spark. The silence is the fuel, and the fuel is always the bigger problem. Pruitt pulled his cuffs. The man heard the metal and didn't move. I am detaining you pending identity verification. I strongly advise you, the man said, calm as still water, to reconsider what you are about to do. That a threat? No. Officer, it's a professional courtesy. Professional courtesy. Now, that's a phrase. That's a phrase lawyers use with other lawyers. A phrase prosecutors use across a table. A phrase that, if Wade Pruitt had possessed 1 ounce of the awareness God gives a fence post, should have stopped him cold. Should have made him think, hold on. Why does this man, this supposed burglar in a faded t-shirt, talk like he's done this from the other side of the room? It didn't stop him. Nothing was going to stop him. The cuffs went on behind the back. Tight, ratcheted down past comfortable into a small, deliberate cruelty. And Caleb's voice broke open on the porch. Dad. No. That's our house. That's our house. And the man turned his head toward his son, cuffed, bent slightly forward, and said the only thing he had left to give him, Caleb, look at me. I need you to do 3 things. Keep recording. Don't move toward these officers. And call your mother. You hear me? Those 3 things. You're going to be fine. I'm going to be fine. Keep recording. Keep recording. He said it twice. Like a prayer. Like the only weapon he was allowed to hand his son and the neighbors. 5, 6 of them now, drawn out onto their porches by the lights and the voices, stood on their manicured lawns and watched a man in handcuffs on a front walk. One of them had a phone up too. Diane Foster was not on her porch. Diane Foster had pulled her curtains the rest of the way shut. Now look at the man's face for a second. Because his face, in that moment, was not fear. It wasn't even anger. It was something heavier than both. It was a tired, so deep it had its own gravity. The tired of a man who, at 52, with everything he had achieved and everything he had become, was still, being asked to prove that he was allowed to stand on his own grass. The exhaustion of a man whose entire life's work was civil rights, and who was, at that exact moment, having his stripped away on a Sunday afternoon in a place called Stonebridge Court. That face, that tired, that's the image that stays. I need to stop here. Because I want you to really get this. This man did everything right. Everything. Hands visible from the first, second. Voice never raised. Told the truth 4 times. Offered the deed. Protected his son. Complied with every command. Even as the commands made less and less sense, he ran the perfect play. Letter perfect. And it didn't matter. That's not a bad day at the office. That's not one rude cop. That's a thing that is broken at the root. Because if doing everything right isn't enough, if the perfect performance of innocence still ends in cuffs on your own lawn, then the rules were never really the point. And it's about to get so much worse before it gets better. Pruitt opened the back door of the cruiser. He put the man inside with a hand that pushed harder than it needed to. No palm on the head to keep it off the door frame. No seatbelt. Just a shove that said, I'm in charge. The door slammed. Through the rear window. The man sat perfectly still, hands cuffed behind him, t-shirt pulled tight across his shoulders, eyes forward. He didn't look at Pruitt. He didn't look at the neighbors and their phones. He sat like a man who had been inside rooms, far more important than the back of a patrol car, and who knew, with absolute certainty, that the world was about to catch up to a mistake it had just made. Pruitt pulled away from the curb. Slow, satisfied, a hunter driving his trophy home, and behind him, on the lawn, his son lowered the phone for 1 second, looked at the empty space where his father had been standing, and then lifted it back up, and kept it pointed, and pressed the green phone icon with a thumb that would not stop shaking. 1 call. The most important phone call any 16-year-old has ever made. I'll tell you who he called and what it set off, but not yet. Just know this. That call, made by a crying kid on a moving day, lit a fuse that ran straight under the Hartwell precinct. And Wade Pruitt could not see it, could not stop it, and would not feel it until the whole building came down around him. The Hartwell precinct at dusk. Fluorescent lights, the smell of burnt coffee and floor cleaner and old paper, a building designed, in every dull beige inch of it, to make you feel small. They brought the man in through the side door. They printed him. Left hand. Right hand. Each finger rolled in ink by an officer who didn't say a word. They stood him against the height chart and photographed him. Front and side. The flash bouncing off a man who had done nothing but try to carry a box marked fragile into his own kitchen. He answered every question. Name. Date of birth. Address. 14 Stonebridge Court. Hartwell. The house you arrested me in front of. Officer. And he gave even that without a trace of heat. Occupation. He gave that too. Plainly. Without weight. And we'll get to exactly what he said. The booking officer typed it all into the system. Name. Date of birth. And then his fingers stopped. They hovered over the keyboard. His eyes locked on the screen. Something had come up. Something that made his whole face go flat and careful. He looked at the screen. He looked at the man. He looked back at the screen. He did not say anything. He finished the booking in total silence. But his hands moved faster now. And his jaw was tight. And he would not make eye contact with the man again. Not once. Remember that. The booking officer saw something on that screen. And the booking officer chose to say nothing. Make a note of it. There's going to be a reckoning later about who saw the truth and swallowed it. And his name is going on the list. Meanwhile, down the hall. The break room. Pruitt sat at a folding table with a coffee and a blank incident report and the easy posture of a man wrapping up a good night's work. Hutchins sat across from him, relaxed, scrolling his phone. 2 guys. End of shift. Nothing to see here. Let me tell you what Pruitt wrote on that report. Because the words matter. Every word is going to come back. Responded to report of burglary in progress. Observed 2 subjects inside a residence believed to be vacant. Primary subject was unable to produce identification. Subject made furtive movements and was non-compliant with lawful commands. Subject became verbally confrontational. Subject detained. Pending investigation. Furtive movements. Non-compliant. Verbally confrontational. Unable to produce identification. Every word of it was a lie. The man hadn't lunged at anything. He'd reached. Slowly. Narrating every motion. Toward a folder. He'd been invited to discuss. He'd been compliant to the point of pain. He'd been the calmest human being on Stonebridge Court the entire time. And unable to produce identification. He wasn't unable. He was not allowed. His ID was in his jacket in the car, and Pruitt wouldn't let him take 3 steps to get it. There's a universe of difference between can't and wasn't permitted to. And Pruitt collapsed that universe into one tidy phrase that made a victim look like a suspect, and there was a phone, and a doorbell camera, and a body camera. That all proved it. But Pruitt had written reports like this before, and every time, they'd stuck. Every time. The system had read his words and nodded and filed them, and moved on. Why would tonight be any different? Hutchins read it, picked up a pen, signed the bottom. Supervisor endorsement. No questions. No flags. No. Are you sure about furtive? Wade. Just a signature. Clean and confident. On a page full of lies. 2 men. 1 Lee. Official paper. Stamped with the authority of the state. They put the man in a holding cell. Metal bench. Concrete walls. He sat down. He folded his hands in his lap. He did not pace. He did not pound the door. He did not demand a lawyer or a phone call or a supervisor. He just sat there, composed. Patient. His cuffed hands now in front of him. Looking at the middle distance, like a man waiting for a train he knew was already coming down the track. And here's the part that's going to land on you like a brick. When you understand it fully, He didn't ask for a lawyer because he didn't need to ask for a lawyer. He was, at that moment, one of the most senior law enforcement officials in the entire United States government. The kind of man other lawyers stand up for. When he walks into a room, he had spent the better part of 3 decades doing exactly one thing, holding police departments accountable for doing exactly this. He wasn't sitting in that cell, waiting to be rescued by the system. He was the system, the part of it they had spent years praying would never come to Hartwell. Ouvrons. The doors of the precinct opened, but it wasn't his wife yet. And it wasn't a lawyer yet. It was a deputy from the front desk walking back toward the break room. And the look on his face was about to turn a quiet Sunday night into the loudest night this department had ever had. 46 minutes past 7. Let me put the pieces on the table the way they actually sat. The man, folded and calm in a holding cell. Caleb, 16, sitting in the cab of a moving truck in the precinct parking lot, having driven there behind his father with a learner's permit and pure terror, phone in his lap. The video already uploaded to 3 places. His mother's voice still ringing in his ear from the call. Pruitt and Hutchins, comfortable in the break room, a rookie named Reyes, alone in her cruiser in the lot, staring at the dashboard, replaying every second, knowing, and hating herself for the 3 words she'd let stop her. And a phone on the front desk. About to ring, the desk officer picked it up expecting nothing. Un noise complet. A lost dog. A Sunday night nobody. The voice on the other end was clipped and professional and did not ask questions. It delivered facts. The way a voice does, when it has the full weight of something enormous standing behind it. This is the Baltimore field office of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. I need to speak with your watch commander immediately. We have received credible notification that your department is currently detaining a senior official of the United States Department of Justice. I need confirmation of his status. And I need your ranking officer on this line in the next 2 minutes. The desk officer's pen stopped against the counter. He didn't answer right away. He just looked at the phone like it had grown teeth. Sir, are you there? Yeah. Yes. Hold. Please hold. He put the call on hold. He stood up. His chair scraped the floor loud enough to bounce off the lobby walls, and he walked back toward the break room. No, he didn't walk. He moved. Fast. That pace that's 1 notch short of a run. And he pushed the door open and found Pruitt and Hutchins exactly where they'd been for the last hour. Coffee. Paperwork. Comfortable. The guy you brought in. The Stonebridge call. The desk officer's voice came out thin. Who'd you say he was? Pruitt didn't even look up. Some guy with no ID inside a vacant house. Why? He's not nobody. Wade. A breath. The FBI is on line 1. He's the head of the Civil Rights Division. At the Justice Department. Majustice. He's an Assistant Attorney General of the United States. The room went silent. Not quiet. Silent. The kind of silence that has a sound to it. The kind where the air itself seems to stop and lean in to watch what happens next. Hutchins' coffee cup froze halfway to his mouth. Pruitt blinked. Once. Twice. He waited for the punchline. He waited for somebody to say, "Got you." That's... No. No. That's not. The FBI is on the phone right now. Wade. Asking for our watch commander. About a man we have sitting in a holding cell. So I'd say it's very right. And Wade Pruitt's face did something it had not done one single time all evening. It changed. The certainty drained out of it, like water out of a cracked glass. The proactive cop, the one who gets out of the car and finds trouble. I found something he had no idea how to handle. He found fear. Remember what I told you that title means? The man in that cell ran the one office in the entire federal government whose job is officers like Wade Pruitt pattern or practice investigations into whole departments. Criminal charges against individual cops who violate your rights under the color of their badge. And Wade Pruitt had just spent the evening following him, accusing him, smashing his wedding glasses, lying about him on an official report, and ratcheting handcuffs down past comfortable on the lawn of his own house. Man didn't pick a fight with a citizen. He picked a fight with the closest thing this country has to the cop. Who polices the cops? In handcuffs, in his own town. And the bill for that was about to come due all at once. Hutchins stood up first. He didn't say a word to Pruitt. He walked out of the break room and down the hall, past the booking desk, past the humming vending machines, all the way to the holding cell. And he looked through the little window, and there was the man, sitting exactly where they'd left him. Hands folded, back straight, t-shirt creased at the shoulders. Everything else about him perfectly, impossibly composed. The same man who'd stood on his own lawn while a cop crushed his wedding glasses and told him to get on his knees. The exact same man. Except now, Hutchins knew who he was. Hutchins opened the cell door. His mouth started moving before his brain could catch it. Mr. Thornton. Sit. I want to. The man rose. Slow. The way he did everything. He straightened his shirt. He squared his shoulders. He looked Sergeant Roy Hutchins directly in the eye. And when he spoke, his voice had not changed 1 degree from the lawn. Low. Even. Immovable. You'll address me by my title. Hutchins swallowed. Yes. Yes. Sir. I'd like the closing folder your officer left on my porch. And I'd like my credentials, which are in the jacket in my car. The car your officer blocked into my own driveway. The credentials I tried to show him before he put me in handcuffs. And there it is. There's the whole thing in one sentence. The deed and the credentials. The 2 documents that would have ended this on the lawn in 15 seconds. The 2 documents Wade Pruitt was told about, was offered, and refused to look at, because he'd already decided what he was looking at. He had the answer 6 inches from his hand the entire time, and he stepped over it, because the man's certainty was worth more to him than the truth. They got the man his things. His phone, his wallet, the leather credential holder. His hands shook. Hutchins's hands, not the man's. As he handed them over, the man opened the holder himself, and he held it up. Not for Hutchins. He held it up toward the camera mounted in the corner of the hallway ceiling. Deliberately. The way a man does when he has spent his entire career understanding exactly what evidence is, and exactly how it gets used. Inside the holder, a federal credential, gold seal, a photograph, a name, a title, United States Department of Justice, Civil Rights Division, an appointment made by the President of the United States and confirmed by a vote of the United States Senate. Not a business card, not a club membership, not something you order online. The authority of the federal government, distilled onto a single laminated card. And Wade Pruitt had laid the deed to this man's house face down on his own lawn, next to a pair of handcuffs, and called him a burglar. The man put the holder back in his pocket, where it had always lived. He walked out of the holding area and down the hall, and there, at the end of it, the precinct doors opened, and a woman came through them, fast, and Caleb came in right behind her. And the man's wife, Adrienne, crossed that lobby in 6 strides and put both hands flat against her husband's chest. Not collapsing, not crying, just confirming, with her own hands, that he was upright and whole. And then she stepped back and she lifted the thing in her other hand. And she handed it to him, a single, printed page. She'd printed it in the truck, on the little portable printer Caleb used for school. Because Adrienne Thornton, who you'll have figured out by now, is no ordinary woman either, knew exactly what her husband would want in his hand when he walked out of that cell. The Fourth Amendment to the Constitution of the United States, the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures, shall not be violated. He looked at it. He folded it once. He put it in his pocket next to the credentials. And he kept walking. Pruitt was standing at the far end of the corridor. He hadn't moved from the spot where the news had hit him. His face was white. His mouth was slightly open. His hands hung at his sides, doing nothing. For the first time all night, doing absolutely nothing at all. The man stopped in front of him. Close. Not aggressive. Just close enough that Wade Pruitt couldn't look anywhere else. Officer Pruitt. Pruitt didn't speak. On my lawn. You told me I didn't belong in this neighborhood. You crushed my wife's glasses under your boot. And you told me to get on my knees. You told me you were the law. The man's voice did not rise. It did not crack. It did not shake. It stayed exactly where it had been all night. Low. Level. Certain. I run the division of the Justice Department that exists for one reason: to hold officers like you accountable when they do exactly what you did to me tonight. Pattern or practice investigations. Criminal civil rights prosecutions. That's my office. That's my work. That's been my whole life. A beat. The hallway held its breath. You're not the law. Officer. You never were. You're a case file. And starting tomorrow morning, you're my case file. He held Wade Pruitt's eyes for 3 full seconds. Then he turned. And Adrienne took one of his arms and Caleb took the other side. And the 3 of them walked out the front doors of the Hartwell precinct and into the night air. And Wade Pruitt stood alone in the empty corridor and listened to their footsteps fade and understood, finally and completely, that he had not won anything tonight. He had lost something that was never coming back. By the time the Thorntons reached the moving truck, Caleb's video was already loose in the world. He'd uploaded it from the parking lot before his mother even arrived. 9 minutes and 40 seconds. Shot straight up and down. Shaky. A 16-year-old's voice cracking behind the camera. A grown man in a faded t-shirt on his own front lawn, telling the truth 4 times. His wedding glasses crushed under a boot. Handcuffed. While I leave mine, while a cop refused to look at the deed 15 feet away. 40,000 views in the first hour. By midnight, 600,000. By morning, every local station in the Washington Metro was running the same headline. And by then the national outlets had it too. And that headline had teeth that no internal review could ever pull out. Top Justice Department. Civil rights. Official handcuffed. As burglar outside his own home. There was no containing that. There was no spinning it. There was no quiet little internal review that could make it go away. Because the man in the video was not just any victim, and not just any citizen, and not even just any powerful man. He was the single official in the entire United States government, most precisely positioned to do something about it. You could not have designed a worse person for the Hartwell Police Department to put in handcuffs if you'd tried for a year. But here's the thing, and I need you to sit in this with me for a second, because it's the heart of the whole story. The Thorntons drove home that night. Same truck, same streets. Back to 14 Stonebridge Court. The house. The boxes still half unpacked. The crushed wedding glasses still on the porch where a boot had left them. They drove in silence. No jokes from Caleb now. No narrating the walk-in closet for Grandma. Just 3 people, and the engine, and the dark, And somewhere between the precinct and that driveway, Caleb spoke from the back of the cab. 16 years old. Voice small. Dad, if you hadn't been you, if you were just some guy, would they have ever let you go? And his father, the Assistant Attorney General for the Civil Rights Division of the United States, the man whose credentials had just walked him out of a cell, the man who had won, completely, in every way that mattered. His father did not answer. He couldn't, because the honest answer was no. The honest answer is that the credentials saved him. The confirmation by the Senate saved him. The FBI's phone call saved him. His son's steady, shaking phone saved him. The doorbell camera the previous owners happened to leave bolted above the door saved him. His wife's hands and her printed page saved him. Remove any one of those things. Anyone. And it's a different night. It's a man who spends the weekend in a cell on a fabricated burglary report. It's a kid who learns the wrong lesson about who he's allowed to be. It's a story that never gets a headline, never gets a hashtag, never gets a single reform. Because the man at the center of it had no credential to flash, and no FBI on the line, and no one, anyone would believe, and that means tonight. Right now, while you're listening to this, on some other quiet street, in some other Stonebridge court, in some town that prides itself on knowing your name, the same thing is happening to a man whose son didn't have a phone out, whose wife isn't a lawyer, whose neighbor didn't leave the camera on, a man who will drive home, if he gets to drive home, and tell nobody. Because what's the point? Because who would believe him? Because the internal review always reviews itself and always comes back clean. That question, would they have ever let you go? It hung in that truck cab like smoke. And the man and the boy and the woman drove the rest of the way home without anybody saying a word. By 8 the next morning, the video had crossed 2 million views. Here's where the Hartwell Police Department's favorite trick stopped working. Chief Harlan Voss had run Hartwell for 9 years on a simple operating philosophy. Keep it quiet. Keep it internal. How? Keep it internal. Keep the numbers sealed. And the news cycle short. 9 complaints. Zero discipline. That wasn't an accident. That was a system. And Voss had built it. And it had worked beautifully. Right up until 46 minutes past 7 the previous evening, Voss got the call from the FBI at home. He didn't sleep. By the time the sun came up, he understood that he was holding a live grenade with the pin already pulled. And that for the first time in his career, the usual moves were not available to him. He couldn't bury it. 2 million people had already seen it. He couldn't stall it. The man it happened to could end his department's federal funding with a single memo. He couldn't review it internally and quietly clear his own officers. Because the man it happened to ran the office that reviews departments exactly like his. So Chief Harlan Voss did the one thing the Hartwell Police Department had not done in years. He opened a real investigation. Not because he wanted to, because there was no longer a single direction left to run. 2 investigations. Actually, and this is where the shape of justice in this story is different from anything Hartwell had ever faced. So stay with me. The first investigation was local. Voss assigned it to Captain Lorraine Diggs, who ran the department's professional standards unit, and who was, in the words of every officer who'd ever sat across a table from her, the last person you wanted asking the questions. Diggs had been with Hartwell for 16 years. She was black. She was meticulous. And she had spent a decade and a half watching complaints disappear into the internal review machine and being unable to do a single thing about it. Now, suddenly, she could, and she was not going to waste it. But the second investigation, the one that actually changed Hartwell forever, was federal, and it came from the very office. The man in the cell ran. Now, here's the thing about Elias Thornton. The thing that tells you everything about who he actually was. He did not pick up the phone and order his own division to bury the Hartwell Police Department. He didn't have to. And more to the point, he wouldn't. The morning after his own arrest, Thornton walked into the office of the Deputy Attorney General and formally recused himself. In writing, he could not lead, supervise, or touch any federal matter involving Hartwell, because he was the victim, and a man who has spent his life demanding that the law be applied cleanly does not get to bend it the first time it bends in his favor. That recusal, that quiet, unglamorous act of stepping back from the one fight he most wanted. That's the dignity of the whole story. He didn't want revenge. He wanted the law to work the way it's supposed to work. Even when, especially when, it would have been so easy to make it personal. So the federal investigation went to his principal deputy, a career attorney named Vivian Carr, who had run these kinds of cases for 15 years and who needed exactly zero encouragement. Within 72 hours, the Civil Rights Division sent the city of Hartwell a letter, a formal notification that the Department of Justice was opening a pattern or practice investigation into whether the Hartwell Police Department engaged in a pattern of conduct that deprives people of their constitutional rights. You need to understand how rare and how heavy that letter is. That is the federal government formally putting an entire police department on trial. Not one officer. The whole department. Its training. Its supervision. Its complaint system. Its culture. The kind of investigation that ends with a federal judge supervising the department for the next 10 years. And it landed on Chief Harlan Voss's desk because his officer crushed a box of wedding glasses on the wrong man's porch. Let me walk you through what they found. Because the evidence in this case was not a he said, she said. The evidence was a wall. And there was no climbing it. Start with the cameras. There were 3. There was Caleb's phone. 9 minutes and 40 seconds. Continuous. Showing a fully compliant man and an officer who escalated for no reason. There was the doorbell camera bolted above the door of 14 Stonebridge Court. The house Pruitt claimed wasn't Thornton's. It had captured everything from a second angle, including the part where Thornton offered the deed and Pruitt said, "Anybody can print a piece of paper." And the part where Pruitt's boot came down on the box. The house had testified on behalf of its owner, and there was Wade Pruitt's body camera, which, and this is the part that should make the hair on your arm stand up, for once, did not come on late. It activated the moment Pruitt stepped out of his cruiser. Every word, every gesture, the full front half of the encounter that Pruitt's camera had so conveniently missed so many times before, captured clean this time, in high definition, with sound. You spend years getting away with a camera that's always a little late. And then the one time it matters, the one time you've finally picked a fight, you can't win. The machine works perfectly. Funny how that goes. Diggs and Carr's teams put the 3 videos side by side. And then they laid Pruitt's incident report on top of them, line by line, and the report fell apart. Like wet paper, the report said the subject was unable to produce identification. All 3 cameras showed a man who said his identification was in the car and was refused permission to retrieve it. Not unable, not allowed. The report said the subject made furtive movements. The cameras showed a man slowly, verbally, reaching toward a folder he'd been invited to discuss, narrating his own hands the entire time. The report said the subject was non-compliant with lawful commands. The camera showed a man who turned and put his hands behind his back when told again, who never raised his voice, who answered every question, who was the calmest person on the entire street. The report said the subject became verbally confrontational. The cameras showed a man who asked, politely, 4 separate times, for an officer to please look at the deed to the house before going any further. 4 claims, 4 lies, all signed at the bottom by a supervisor. Then they pulled the dispatch records. And somehow it got worse. There was no burglary report from inside that house. There couldn't be. The only people in it owned it. There was no description of a crime. No broken window. No forced entry. No alarme. There was only Diane Foster's emergency call. And when they pulled that recording, the entire probable cause for the whole night reduced down to 4 words about the color of 2 men's skin. They're black. That was it. That was the case. A neighbor's discomfort. A cop's certainty. And the word black. Then Carr's team pulled Wade Pruitt's full history. The delivery driver, the 17-year-old walking home from practice, both complaints, both dismissed, both showing the identical fingerprint, a black person in the Stonebridge area, an aggressive contact, no real basis. A report written afterward to paper it over, and that's when Officer Daniela Reyes asked to be interviewed. She came in alone, no union rep, no attorney, just a 14-month rookie and a written statement and the face of someone who hadn't slept in 3 days. She sat down across from Captain Diggs and she told the truth. All of it. She confirmed that Thornton was calm from the first, second to the last. She confirmed that Pruitt initiated every single escalation. She confirmed that Hutchins endorsed it without a question. And she told them about the 3 words. Pruitt's got it, the moment she reached for the brake and got slapped off it. And then Reyes did the bravest thing in the entire investigation. She didn't stop it that night. She told Diggs about 2 other stops she'd been present for in her 14 months. Both black drivers. Both in or near Stonebridge. Both the same pattern. No clear violation. Aggressive. Contact. A report written to justify it after the fact. Neither one had turned into a complaint. Because, as one of those drivers told Reyes off the record, filing a complaint against a Hartwell officer was just asking to get pulled over again next week. Diggs wrote it all down. Then she asked the only question that mattered. Why didn't you report this before? And Reyes looked at her hands and said, the thing that is true of so many people standing next to so much wrong. Because I told myself it wasn't that bad. That maybe I was reading it wrong. That Pruitt was just intense. That it wasn't my place. She looked up, but I wasn't reading it wrong. I knew it then. I know it now. I just didn't want to be the one. Diggs didn't judge her. She wrote it down. And she moved on. Because I just didn't want to be the one. That is not one rookie's failure. That is the exact machinery that makes a Wade Pruitt possible. The silence isn't passive. The silence is the load-bearing wall. They brought Wade Pruitt in with his union representative. He sat down across from Captain Diggs with his arms crossed and his jaw set, still wearing the posture of a man who believed, somewhere deep down, that he'd done nothing wrong, that the world had simply embarrassed him by being more complicated than he'd assumed. Diggs started easy. Walk me through the stop. And Pruitt did, almost word for word from his report. Burglary in progress. Subjects in a vacant house. No identification. Furtive movements. Non-compliant. He recited it like a man who'd told the story to himself enough times to believe it. Diggs let him finish. Then she asked one question. You said the house was believed to be vacant. Did you run the address before you made contact? Silence. It changed hands 72 hours before you arrived. Officer. New deed. Recorded. Public. 15 seconds in your in-car computer. Did you run it? There wasn't time. It was an active burglary call. It was a neighbor who didn't recognize a man carrying a box. There was no alarm, no broken window, no forced entry, and no crime. Did you, at any point, look at the deed, mister? Thornton offered you on the lawn. Pruitt's arms tightened. Anybody can print a deed. His name was on it. His son was on the porch. There was a moving truck at the curb. Diggs leaned forward an inch. What? Specifically, in your training and experience, told you that a man unloading a moving truck into a house with his teenage son on a Sunday afternoon was committing a burglary. Walk me through that professional judgment. Pruitt opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. He was inside a property that the call said was vacant. And he couldn't. He could. You wouldn't let him. There's a difference. And it's on 3 cameras. Pruitt's hands came off his crossed arms and went flat on the table. And he said the thing that men like him always say. The sentence that's supposed to be the end of the conversation. I used my professional judgment, and Diggs let that sit there in the air. Professional judgment. A 52-year-old man unloading a moving truck with his kid in his own driveway on a Sunday. And Wade Pruitt's professional judgment told him, burglar, your professional judgment. Diggs said quietly, Officer Pruitt, I've now reviewed 2 prior complaints in your file. A delivery driver you followed for 1.5 miles and asked 3 times if the packages were really his. A 17-year-old you patted down on his own block and asked what he was doing in this part of town. And now, Mr. Thornton, on his own lawn. I want you to tell me what those 3 men have in common. Take your time. Pruitt didn't take his time. Pruitt didn't say anything at all, because there was nothing he could say that wouldn't be the answer. And they both already knew the answer. And the answer was sitting in the room with them. And it had been there the whole time. Diggs let the silence run. 5 seconds. 10. 15. Then she moved on. Hutchins's interview was shorter. And in some ways worse. Pruitt at least believed his own story. Hutchins didn't believe anything. Hutchins just deflected. Every answer was a half-step sideways. I wasn't present for initial contact. I was there in a support capacity. I trusted my officer's assessment of the situation. Diggs let him talk himself out. Then she opened her folder. Sergeant Hutchins, you endorsed a report describing a fully compliant man as non-compliant and verbally confrontational. When your rookie officer suggested running the address before escalating, you told her. And this is on body camera. Pruitt's got it. And you did not look at her. At no point in the encounter did you question, slow, or override a single decision Officer Pruitt made. So I have one question. She closed the folder. At what point? Exactly. Did your support capacity include supervising anything? Hutchins stared at the table. He had no answer. Because there was no answer. He hadn't questioned it because he never intended to. He was there to back Pruitt up, not to supervise him, not to protect the public, just to make sure the wave never formed. And that, the comfortable, professional, deeply ordinary choice, to stand behind a lie and call it procedure. That was the foundation the whole thing was built on. Pruitt was the man who did it. Hutchins was the reason men like Pruitt never had to stop. Captain Diggs compiled the local report. It took her 6 days. When it landed on Chief Voss's desk, it was 48 pages. And every page pointed in the same direction. Officer Wade Pruitt conducted a detention without reasonable suspicion or probable cause. His report contained material falsehoods directly contradicted by 3 separate video sources. His conduct violated the constitutional rights of Elias Thornton. His prior complaint history, combined with Officer Reyes's testimony, established a pattern of policing black residents differently, more aggressively, more suspiciously, with justifications written after the fact. The report used one word to describe that pattern, the same word 3 of Pruitt's own evaluations had used to praise him: proactive. Except now, it wasn't a compliment. Now it was a finding, a documented, official, career-ending finding. Funny how a single word can mean two opposite things, depending entirely on who finally bothers to look at what's underneath it. Chief Voss read all 48 pages in one sitting. Then he read them again, and by the end of the week, he made the decision. Not because his conscience suddenly woke up, but because every other door had been welded shut, because the man Pruitt arrested could pursue federal criminal charges, because the video was on a loop on every channel in the metro, because 2 million views had become 5, and because the federal letter sitting next to the report meant that, for the first time in the history of the Hartwell Police Department, doing nothing was no longer an option. Pruitt was called in first. The meeting lasted 9 minutes. Voss on one side of the table, Diggs beside him, Pruitt across from them with his union rep, who said almost nothing because there was nothing to say. Voss kept it short, terminated, effective immediately. Badge and service weapon surrendered before he left the building. No appeal recommendation. No transfer. No quiet resignation to save face. Done. Pruitt didn't argue. He didn't shout. He didn't slam the table. He just sat there, the same way Elias Thornton had sat in that holding cell, except without the composure, without the dignity, without any of the thing that had made Thornton, even in handcuffs, the most powerful man in the building. Pruitt stood up, unclipped his badge, set it on the table, laid his weapon beside it, and walked out down the empty hall, past the break room, where he'd written his lies, past the booking desk, where an officer had seen the truth on a screen and said nothing, and out the front doors of the Hartwell precinct for the last time. He told a man he was the law. The law disagreed. But Wade Pruitt's termination was not the end of it for Wade Pruitt, because losing your job is one thing, and being prosecuted is another. The United States Attorney for the District of Maryland, a prosecutor named Daniel Okonkwo, who you'll recall was already involved the night the FBI made that phone call, brought a federal charge against Pruitt. Deprivation of rights under color of law, the federal crime of using the authority of a badge to violate a person's constitutional rights, the exact kind of case that runs through the exact division Elias Thornton runs, prosecuted by entirely different people because Thornton was recused, which is the entire reason it could be prosecuted cleanly at all. Hutchins came next, demoted from sergeant back to patrol officer, 90-day suspension without pay, supervisory authority permanently revoked. His career wasn't over the way Pruitt's was, but the comfortable version of it, the version where silence was a strategy and complicity was invisible, and you never, ever had to be the one. That version was finished. Hutchins signed the paperwork without a word and left through the back. No cameras, no statement. Just a man carrying the full weight of everything he'd chosen not to do. The civil side moved fast too. The Thorntons filed a federal civil rights lawsuit against the city of Hartwell, against Pruitt, against Hutchins. And here's something that tells you, again, exactly who Elias Thornton was. The lawsuit was never really about the money. The city settled within 4 months, for an amount that stayed sealed, and the Thorntons directed a large part of it to a legal fund for victims of police misconduct in Maryland who don't have a credential to flash. But the money was never the point. The point was the consent decree the settlement carried. And the consent decree had teeth. And then there was the big one, the federal pattern or practice investigation, The one Vivian Carr's team ran for the next year. The one that put the entire Hartwell Police Department under the microscope. That investigation ended the way the heaviest ones do. With a federal consent decree. Entered as a court order. Supervised by an independent monitor. Binding on the department for years. Mandatory bias training. Every year. For every officer. A revised stop and detain policy requiring documented, articulable, reasonable suspicion before any detention. A real complaint system with an independent civilian review board that had actual authority, not the internal review machine that always reviewed itself and always came back clean, but a board of citizens with the power to investigate and recommend discipline, and an early warning system that flagged any officer with multiple complaints for mandatory review before the next complaint became the next headline. Structural change. Not just one fired cop. Not just one punished sergeant. Prevention. The whole machine. Rebuilt. Under a federal judge's eye. That's the difference. That's what makes this more than a revenge story. One man got fired. And yes, that felt good. But one fired man doesn't change a town. A consent decree changes a town. A civilian review board with teeth changes a town. An early warning system changes a town. The reason the next delivery driver, the next kid walking home from practice, the next family unloading a moving truck on a Sunday, the reason they get treated like human beings in Hartwell now isn't that one bad apple got removed. It's that the barrel itself got rebuilt by the force of federal law and Officer Daniela Reyes. She was not disciplined. Captain Diggs's report named her cooperation as a model of internal accountability and made sure, in writing, that her willingness to tell the truth mattered. She'd stayed quiet on the lawn. She knew it. Everyone knew it. But she spoke up after. And she didn't just speak up about that night. She opened up about a pattern. And Diggs made certain that counted for something. Reyes transferred into the unit that worked directly with the new civilian review board. Within a year, the rookie who'd been told that's not your place was sitting at the table where the decisions got made. It didn't erase what happened on Stonebridge Court. Nothing could. But it was a start. Let me take you back to where this started. A cold afternoon. A moving truck at the curb. A father carrying a box marked fragile into a house that was finally, legally, recorded and stamped. A 16-year-old narrating the walk-in closet for his grandmother. One officer. One neighbor's discomfort. One word. Black. That became the whole case. Elias Thornton had the credentials. The title. The presidential appointment. The confirmation by the United States Senate. Decades of work holding departments exactly like Hartwell's accountable. And not a single piece of all of that stopped what happened to him on his own lawn. It only guaranteed there were consequences afterward. That's the part that stays with me. The system didn't protect Elias Thornton on Stonebridge Court. His title protected him. His son's phone protected him. The doorbell camera the previous owners forgot to take protected him. His wife's printed page protected him. The FBI's phone call protected him. Strip away any one of those things, and it's a different night, and a different man, and no headline at all, which means somewhere out there tonight. It's still happening to the man who has none of those things. But here's what else is true. And I'm not going to leave you only in the dark, because that wouldn't be the whole truth either. Hartwell changed. Not perfectly, not overnight, but it changed. The Civilian Review Board published its first quarterly report within 6 months, and that report contained 2 new findings of excessive force that led to actual discipline. 2 cases that, under the old internal review machine, would have vanished without a trace. Now exposed and acted on under the new system. A woman named Corinne Dell, who had run a small accountability project out of her own living room for 11 years, documenting complaints nobody in power would read, stood at a podium outside the precinct the morning after the arrest and said the thing the whole country needed to hear, that this was not an isolated incident. It was a pattern, and that the only reason there were cameras pointed at that building at all was that the victim happened to be one of the most powerful civil rights officials in America. What about the ones who aren't? She asked. What about the names we'll never know? And then she spent the next year making sure the new board actually heard those names. Her organization went from her living room to a real office with a real staff. The complaints that used to disappear now had somewhere to land. Even Diane Foster, the neighbor who made the call. She showed up to a community forum 8 months later, stood up in front of a room full of her neighbors and the Thornton family, and apologized. Not a perfect apology. There's no perfect apology for what she set in motion. But she stood up, and she said out loud that she had looked at 2 men carrying boxes and seen a crime that wasn't there, and that she had been wrong in a way she was going to spend a long time understanding. It didn't undo anything, but it was a person, in public, choosing to name her own part in it, instead of pulling the curtains shut. And after everything, that's not nothing. Officer Reyes stood up at a regional policing conference a year out and talked about the cost of silence, about what it means to reach for the brake and get told it's not your place, about choosing, the next time, to be the one. She told 300 officers a version of, "I knew it then, and I know it now." And she told them what it cost her to stay quiet, and what it cost her department, and she asked them to be braver than she'd been on a lawn in Stonebridge. Change doesn't happen in one night. It happens in the morning after sun, and the morning after that, and the one after that. Remember the house? 14 Stonebridge Court. It's still there. Caleb finished out high school in Hartwell, better school district, which was the whole reason they'd moved. The reason a father uprooted his family for a fresh start. He graduated. He kept that 9-minute and 40-second video, but he doesn't watch it. He doesn't need to. And on the community center bulletin board, 2 blocks from that lawn, there's a flyer now. Hartwell, Civilian Review Board, open meeting, 2nd Tuesday of every month. All voices welcome. That flyer did not exist 2 years ago. It exists now because one man sat in a holding cell with his hands folded in his lap and waited, with absolute patience, for a broken system to remember what it was supposed to be. And then he recused himself from breaking it back, because that's who he was. And Elias Thornton. He released a written statement. No press conference. No interviews. Just words on a page. The tool he'd trusted his entire career. He wrote that he had not sought this confrontation. He wrote that he recognized his position, gave him protections that the vast majority of people in his community do not have. He wrote that the reforms were a beginning, not an ending. And then he went back to work, back to the division, back to the office, whose entire job is holding departments like Hartwell accountable. Only now, when he walked into a room and talked about why this work matters, every person in it had seen the video. He'd lived the thing he'd spent his career fighting, and he carried that with him into every investigation that came after. Because now he didn't just know it on paper. He knew it on a lawn, in handcuffs, with his son crying behind a phone, because that's what justice actually does. When it works, it doesn't stop. It doesn't rest. It shows up the next morning, puts on the suit, picks up the file, and tries again. For the man with the credential, and, God willing, a little more every year. For the man without one, okay. So, this whole story, I made it up. It's not real. Elias Thornton isn't a real man. Hartwell isn't a real town. Wade Pruitt never crushed anybody's wedding glasses on a porch. But the way my chest got tight writing it, that part's real. Because stuff like this, a neighbor calling the cops on a black man moving into his own house, a man getting cuffed on his own lawn for the crime of belonging somewhere, that happens. That happens out there. In real towns. With real names. All the time. And here's the part that should sit heavy on all of us. Most of the time, there's no FBI on the phone. Most of the time, there's no credential in the jacket. Most of the time, the camera comes on late, or there is no camera, and the man just goes home. If he gets to go home, and he tells nobody, because the review reviews itself and comes back clean, and the flyer never goes up on the bulletin board. And the town keeps right on knowing everybody's name. The title saved Elias Thornton. But the question his son asked in that truck, if you were just some guy, would they have ever let you go? That question is the whole thing. That question is for you. So I want to know, have you ever had to prove you belonged somewhere you had every right to be? Have you ever watched it happen to somebody and stayed quiet because it wasn't your place? Be honest. Put it in the comments. Somebody down there needs to read that they're not the only one. If this story made you feel something, if it made your chest tight the way it made mine, hit that like button. Share it with somebody who needs to hear it. And if you're not subscribed yet, you already know what to do. I'll see you in the next one.